Hey, I'm really excited. This week we have a special guest here. Celeste and I went to high school together. Did we go to elementary school
I
together
don't know.
too?
Do you go?
Were
Yeah,
you in
I went to
Nettleton?
Nettleton. So
All right, all right. So we've been in each other's circle for most of our lives, and have drifted to different parts of the state here. But Celeste is a children's book author, and is a relevant topic for our podcast tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and let Celeste introduce herself, and we'll roll along
hi,
here.
I'm Celeste. I'm so excited to be here and to share about the book that I am attempting to publish, self-publish, called As I Am, which has a protagonist who is non-binary. And I'm an early childhood educator, and I have been for the past 15 years. And I'm very passionate about anti-bias education and diverse representation in classrooms. So, yeah.
That's so awesome. So, what got you interested in that particular area of research and deciding to write this book?
So it's twofold. It's personal and it's professional. So I've done anti-bias work in early childhood settings for many years, and something that is just sorely lacking is books about gender. Um, and there is children and teachers and parents are confused about what is gender development, what is natural progression, what is the difference between gender and sex and sexual orientation, like it's like a thing. Yeah, people are confused.
As a transgender person, I can personally attest to this. There was no education when I was growing up, and I had to do all of my own
Yeah,
education as like a 12-year-old
yeah,
year old. So,
yeah,
yeah, I appreciate what you're
yeah.
doing.
It's just, yeah. And so there's entire for young children, like their stories are never spoken of. Like they don't see themselves represented in their children's books, in their literature, in their media, and that's kind of erasing their identities, right? And that's, to me, a very oppressive way to for children. And this is for all children. Like overcoming the gender binary is beneficial for everyone, right? It's hugely beneficial for children who are non-binary and may or may not know of that term, or may or may not know yet fully that's who they are, right? Because they don't have any stories, because they don't have the language, because they haven't seen it modeled or accepted. And early childhood, you guys, it is so binary. Like it is Paw
Yeah,
Patrol or it is Frozen. You know what I mean? Like those are kind of like
yeah.
what people have. It's getting a little bit, tiny bit better. But even children's stories, it's really polarizing, right? And so just knowing that there's so little representation and so little available, and what really kind of put me over like the edge of like, okay, this needs to be something that I'm going to work on doing, is when I just dove in to try to find books that had a non-binary protagonist. And I literally couldn't find one book that had a human protagonist. There was one that it has like, I'm not sure if it's, I can't remember if it's a hamster or a bear, but there wasn't a human non-binary protagonist. And I was like, that's actually insane. Like there's no like that
It is.
in 2022, that's doesn't make any sense. And so they're starting to get some more for like trans kids. You can find a few. But there's just so
Like
little.
binary trans
Yeah.
kids.
Yep, trans kids, like I Am
Okay.
Jazz is a very famous one. So you can find
Hmm.
some, but they're still like in terms of like the breadth of the population, they're like 0.5%. And that's just a number I'm making up from my own research, but there's so few, right?
But it makes complete
Yeah.
sense. I mean, I have a 5-year-old, and we seek out these kinds of books. And, as it has been really fun to purchase and read books from Black authors at a time when we need to be having some real intersectional conversations in the world. But I agree. I mean, I have a 5-year-old who has a trans older sister, and finding
That's me.
anything that is going to help us navigate that. Well, heck, I mean, part of this too. One of our favorite books, which Anna and I got, is a book that John Oliver wrote about Marlon
Marlon
Bundo, the
Bundo.
the the gay rabbit of Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, done as a parody to Mike Pence's book, but also a really lovely gay relationship story that we go back to a lot because it's just a really really fun book, and
It's
so
really
all that's
sweet.
there.
Yeah, and like it genuinely talks about queer topics in such a good way, um, especially regarding like homosexuality, which is on top of all the trans things that are never talked about. Homosexuality is still very far behind in education, and especially for education of young kids. So seeing that meant to be a younger kid book talking about homosexuality is really important to me as a queer woman.
Mm.
And so seeing what you're doing too as a non-binary or writing a non-binary book is fucking awesome. Like I have a partner who's non-binary, and I know that they will love to read this book, and giving that education to young kids is so important to
Mm,
me.
mm,
So
mm.
I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Well, and we talk a lot about non-binary erasure
mm,
in all of this.
mm,
That there's a lot of information about being trans, and there is not nearly as much about
yeah,
supporting non-binary folks.
yeah,
So even that alone is crossing a huge information
yes.
barrier.
And I think part, like just understanding the difference of what gender can mean to different people. And
Hmm.
I was thinking about it this morning because the tagline for the book is Beyond the Gender Binary, and there's a number of books that have that name already, and I was like, I don't want to steal that name from somebody else. I hadn't realized that it was a tagline used for so many books. I should have, because I know about these books, but I didn't connect the dots until this morning. And then I was just thinking about the binary and how, like, forces of oppression want to put us all in a binary. You know what I mean? And so gender,
Hmm.
obviously, either you're hyper masculine or you're hyper feminine, and that's what's tolerated. Either you're black or you're white or you're brown, and that's what's tolerated. Either you're religious or you're atheist, and you know what I mean? Like, but our whole lives are in gray areas. There's nuance on top of nuances,
Yeah.
and when you accept the nuances, you can't put people in boxes anymore, right? And you can't other people anymore.
Yeah.
And you just kind of you just pull the rug out beneath the people that are trying to maintain power, and you can just accept people for who they are. And so that has been a learning from this book, in terms of just me really thinking about, what does the gender binary mean? You know what I mean? And that's why I think that this book is for all of our freedoms, right? Like it doesn't matter
Yeah.
how you identify. It really allows every girl who identifies as a girl, right, to be more free in
Hmm.
their masculinity or their femininity, right? It
Yes.
just allows us to be who we are, without shame and without fear, and to feel seen and to feel accepted and to feel loved. um
You
Well,
know,
and it's such an early age that you're targeting. I mean, I appreciate that what you know as an educator, I think, is that we need to lay the foundation for this before we start learning the societal ways that all of this is talked about. And so I guess this is one of the questions that I had for you tonight, which is, as a parent and as an educator and someone who is writing this book, what should we be telling our kids about the gender binary?
Well, first of all, it's not real, right? So I do a lot of race work as well, and I say, just, race is a myth. It was an intentional lie. You know what I mean? And it's not real. It's one way how we label people. Now, with all that said, race is there's a lot now to race and race identity. So it started off as a lie, and now it's a lie and it's a reality. So it's tricky to talk about, but um when it comes to the gender binary, just saying, you can be a girl, or you can be a boy, or you can be lots of different things, and all of that's fine. I think it starts with sharing that there are multiple representations, right? Just sharing all the representations that are out there, and then and then asking questions, and having it be a place of inquiry. But first, it's a place of comfort, right? So that if you don't feel comfortable, it's a lot harder to grow into yourself and to be your authentic self. So making a place of comfort, but also sometimes we can't be what we never see, right? And so that's why
hmm
sharing diverse representations and saying that they're all accepted, and okay is like the first place to go. Because I guess in my mind, when I'm working with children, I want that child to feel free from oppression, and that's why I do anti-bias work. Um, it's grotesque how much oppression children face, right? On all the different
Mhm.
levels because their realities are not spoken of, right? So in the series that I have right now, as I'm hoping to make it a series of books. Every child in Kai's classroom will have their own book. And so one of them will be Jessica and her father or her mother. I haven't decided, to be honest. Maybe you can tell me what you think is better. One of her parents is trans. And
Mhm.
and that will follow her experience, right? And then some of the other experiences might be that they live in transitional housing because that is an experience that
Yeah.
kids have, lots of kids have, and they never see that mirrored back to them. You know what I mean? One of them could have a parent
Yeah.
who's in the military, right? One of them could have a parent who's in
Mhm.
jail. One of them could be dealing with mental illness. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a million different real experiences that kids have that are tough, right? That children's literature don't touch.
Yep.
And as adults, we're able to have literature that's tough that helps us heal our trauma and speak our truth, right? But children,
Right.
we don't acknowledge, I think, children's full humanity, and so we're not giving them that literature. You know what I mean?
Well, just from my own experiences having been a child educator for 8 years and then also, working in the medical field. I mean, that's entirely true. Like you think of kids pretty much as a smaller subsect of their adult human, and like for a lot of kids that might be true, but for some it's definitely not. Kids who have parents who are in jail, in the military, something like that, are living in unstable situations, you know they learn a lot more about independence way earlier on and don't ever see that, you know, they don't ever see that
Mm,
shown in their
mm.
age group. It's always something that they learn about when they get older or something like that, and they start to see other people or other experiences that are similar to theirs. And so, honestly, it's really impressive that you're able to talk about these stories in a view that kids can understand because they don't have that background. They don't have the necessary understanding to connect the nuances between all of society.
Yeah, right. And if we can start talking about mental illness to young children, then hopefully that we can start undoing that stigma, right? And understanding
Hmm.
what it means to
Yeah.
get help. And children are aware that there's people who are without homes or have housing insecurity, right? But if we talk about it from a story of a first person, from a kid that is very similar to them, right? So that the children readers who are reading it can empathize and understand that person, then we're also helping children see people who have different experiences still have this their same humanity, have the same desire for acceptance, have the same desire for fun, have, you know what I mean? Like, so that's sort of the goal for this series. um but
Hmm.
it all started with this book, As I Am. And I think, if I could, I just want to take a moment because um I imagine some of your listeners will wonder. So, because I didn't share my pronouns, I'm she, her, and
Yeah,
I
please.
am cisgendered. And I think, how, like, so, a number of friends and readers have been like, so, Celeste, why are you writing a book about somebody who's non binary? Like, how are you taking the mic from other people? Like, you know what I mean? Is that your story to tell? And I think all of those are really valid questions. So I grappled with that for a long time. And a dear friend of mine, um, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, switched their pronouns to be non binary. And I wanted them to write the story and, or help me. Maybe we could collaborate. And they said, Celeste, everywhere I go, I'm the educator on gender. It's
Yep,
Yeah.
exhausting.
it
You
very
write the
much is.
story and I'll help edit it. And so that's what kind of pushed me over from being like an ally on the side, you know what I'm saying, to like an ally
Yeah.
full in. Like you know what I mean? Like, I don't, with their support, it helped give me the courage, and also make sure that the story was authentic, right? It's not, I
Mhm.
had a number of folks who are non-binary, review it and edit it, and I couldn't have done it without their feedback, because I think that wouldn't be authentic or real. Um,
Mhm.
but I think in all of our work, when we're working with any groups who are underserved or face oppression from the patriarchy or from wherever, um, people who are cisgendered need to be fully engaged in this work, right? Like
Yes.
we can't just
Yeah.
Yes.
pretend. And
Yeah.
so I shared before, I'm doing a lot of race work to develop a race curriculum for young children, and it was the same, like reaching out to my friends who are educators who are Black, and often them saying, Celeste, we are too busy. And honestly, this
Yeah.
work is
Mhm.
too emotionally difficult for me.
It's
Yeah.
exhausting and it's re-traumatizing, and it's I mean, I hear you so loud and clear as the cisgender part of this two-person podcast here, because part of the reason why Anna and I got so excited about this was I've been trying to advocate for trans rights since Anna came out as trans to me, but without anything actionable to be able to do about that. And that can be really frustrating as an ally who wants to
Mm,
do more.
mm,
And this is across the board, but since that's what we're talking about here, this is the action. And then being
Yep.
able to divert some of the transphobia away from trans people and say the bullshit that you are talking about doesn't affect me, so bring it on.
Yeah.
And I love being on social media with the our podcast logo and being the person behind the scenes there, because I'm like, you can say as much shit to me as you want, and I would love to take those
mm,
bullets,
mm,
because that's the
mm,
smallest
mm,
contribution that I can give as an ally to
mm.
my daughter and our other trans friends and non-binary friends. So
Well,
so thank you for doing that.
as a binary and non-binary trans person who runs an educational goddamn podcast and actively vouches for and educates everybody she possibly fucking can, it does get really fucking exhausting. Sorry about all the swearing in a children's book episode, but that's this podcast.
We know who our
Uh,
audience is. It's
yeah.
fine.
So I do my best all the time that I can to educate and help people understand the things that they need to know about trans people and queer people and things like that, because that is what I've dedicated a lot of my time and resources to. This podcast is an example of that. But it is traumatizing, and it is a struggle, especially when you are the target of that misinformation or you know
Mm,
unknowingness. I get misgendered all the
mm,
time, and it's conversations every single time, and every time it hurts. And so having cis people like you, Celeste, who are taking on the responsibility to educate, and you, my father, who can work behind the scenes occasionally and take some of those bullets for me, like those are really impactful to me as a
mm.
person who suffers a lot of fatigue from education and fatigue from the hate. So thank you both for doing what you're doing, and also, I fully endorse cis people and people of not queer descent is what I was about to say. That's not right. People who are not queer.
Those queer genetics.
People who are not queer taking on some of
Mm,
that responsibility to educate, because
Yeah.
yeah, it would be best for a trans person who's experienced it to be talking about trans issues. It would be best for a queer person to be talking about queer issues. But also, it's like there's only so much of us, and we are all fucking busy doing our own things. So having cis people willing to take that on and getting help, that's the biggest part, is getting assistance from those who are
mhm,
experiencing the
mhm.
stuff is really critical here. And so I appreciate that from your end as well, Celeste.
So thinking about allyship, then in regards to your book, I mean, what do you want educators to do with this? I just ordered my copy, and then I ordered a copy for my workplace as well. And so what should I be planning to do with this book, and how do we use this as a teaching
Awesome.
tool?
Well, I mean, just reading it, I'm happy to read it now or read part of it now so people can get an idea of what it's like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It will have a conversation guide, just real basic. Okay. So things that you guys are very well versed in, obviously, but which teachers might not be versed in. And I think I am hopeful that this book will be educational for kids and for parents, and just kind of like normalizing the lived authentic experiences that are outside the gender binary, and just opening ourselves up to gender fluidity and not being so scared and frightened of it. And I've been thinking a lot about white fragility as a white person, and recently also about cis fragility, and how
Mm-hmm.
like cisgendered people, we live like this is like I never have to think about my identity because it's the air that I breathe in. It's just affirmed all the time. And then writing this book, and in my friendships, just like, how am I, one, maybe being defensive, right? How am I reacting? How much am I really trying to reprogram my brain to use them, their pronouns? You know what I mean? Like it that was part of the motivation for writing the book, is that was challenging for me to switch my pronouns and to use them, right? And I was misgendering my friend a lot, and it caused a lot of anxiety for me. And just more of my cis fragility right there. But um so like having this book introduce them, their pronouns, and just, if you can do that when they're learning language, then it's in their foundation of their brain. But right now, how I grew up was such a huge binary that my whole entire brain's architecture is built around the binary, right? And so
Yeah.
I have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to reprogram my brain, which I'm working on doing, right? And causing a lot of harm unintentionally in the process. But the goal for this book is that if we read it to our children, they use them, their pronouns. It's just a part of their everyday language, right? And it's not something that they have to like kind of undo a lot of harmful learning to be able to be helpful, healthy allies in this world.
I mean, Celeste, I'm sure that you, as a biased educator of children, will attest to it is so important to start these skills and start these conversations, especially in young kids, because that's how society changes. It's not from me, a trans person, talking to other people who are accepting about trans issues. I can only do that so far. It's talking to kids about these issues and talking about, hey, it's okay to be trans and it's okay to not be trans, but you need to respect trans people. And hey, it's okay that you are what you are and whatever, like having these conversations with young kids is how we reformat how society is
Yes,
formatted.
yes, and it's just like
So,
removing the othering, right? So we are different. We have different
yes.
identities. But Anna, you're trans, I'm not trans, but you're not so far away. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're no different
Right.
Yep.
from me than my best friends are. You know what I mean? Or my sisters are, or my father. You know what I mean? Like, but how we've written the narrative, is that we other each other, and we make it so that we lose our compassion for each other. And so, but children don't have this baggage. You introduce it and they fully
No.
accept it, right? And so
Yeah.
they don't have white fragility, they don't have cis fragility, they don't have it, right? And if we could grow a generation of kids that don't have it, then I literally don't know how far humanity can go, right? Like, we don't need to have these
Yep.
oppressive forces. And it is part of human nature to want power, right? And so we have to be active in how we nurture our children to overcome that and be compassionate and empathetic and find their sense of worth in different ways, right? But that is not difficult to do, right? It just takes a little intention with how we work with kids. Yeah.
It absolutely does.
Absolutely.
So you'd
Ooh,
offered
yes.
maybe to read a passage from your book. I think that would be really
Yeah.
helpful for
I
us
can
to
read the
hear
whole thing
the
if
language
you
you're
want me
using.
to. And then if you want to cut some of it out, you can. And then I don't, this is not something that we have to do. But I am working on my tagline. And so if
Workshop some taglines right here.
are
I
you
love
serious?
that.
Okay, then
Yeah.
that's what I was.
I am serious. No,
Okay,
hell
good,
yeah.
good. And even if listeners want to pitch in, right? We don't have to decide. This doesn't have to be decided for a couple of months. So I am all for workshopping this. So it used to be, the title is As I Am. And then the tagline was A Children's Story Beyond the Gender Binary, which I want it to be that people know it's about gender when they get into it. I want it so that when people search for gender children's book, this book can come up. So that's what I originally had. But now I'm thinking about As I Am, a book about gender diversity, love, and belonging.
Oh, I really like
I
that a
like
lot.
that. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
bit long. It's
That's
a bit
very
long.
good. Yeah, it is a bit long, but like that's fine.
So, but what about this
Yeah.
one? Embracing our gender diversity.
It's more
It's more
succinct.
succinct.
It is more succinct.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost, yeah, there's something a little more actionable about your second one there.
Yeah.
So that makes me think about like helping children, you know, I'm sorry. And then whatever you said for that third one there, embrace the gender, non-binary, or
Yeah.
yeah, just something that gives some action to it.
Helping children
I don't
embrace.
know. I feel like the second one is a little bit too succinct of like, you're not necessarily getting through exactly what you're trying to get through with it. And not to say that like that's a bad thing, because that's what the story is for, but that's just kind of where I'm at.
Okay, how about I read it and then you guys can let me know if anything is coming to you in terms of what the tagline could be. Okay.
Love it.
Dedication to my dear friend Jay and their cat Skylar. Every morning, Sky looks up at me. She pitter-patters into my room, tail waving in the air. She jumps on my bed and curls up next to me. Purr, she says, as I scratch behind her ears. Sky loves it when we play with toys and share yummy treats. She is afraid when there's a thunderstorm. She feels safest with me, curled under my arms. Sky doesn't care what I look like or how I dress. She loves me as I am. Since I was a baby, Sky would give me head nudges and squishy cuddles. She didn't care if I was a boy or a girl, or neither. Maybe both? You see, I'm non binary, not a boy or a girl, beyond. Just me. All of my friends say that they are either a girl or a boy, but I don't feel like a boy or a girl. This makes some people confused. They don't know what to call me or how. I don't use she or he to describe me. I use they. I have long hair and I like painted fingernails. I wear soft t-shirts, shorts, and sparkle shoes. My favorite toys are dolls and trains. When the teacher tells us to line up, boys in one line and girls in the other, there is no line for me. Something deep in my gut says, not me. Why do I have to choose? Can't you see? I want to be loved for who I am as I am. I'm not a boy or a girl. I am non binary. Some kids don't understand me. School can be hard and sometimes I'm lonely. But I've made some friends who see and love the real me. Jennifer is my best friend. Her mom is trans. She understands me. This makes my heart sing. After a long day, I come home. I know that Sky will be there. I push the door handle and she bolts to the door, swerving between my feet with a great big purr. She loves me as I am, and I snuggle in.
Well, you won us over as cat people. So
Yeah, I literally had to turn around and
A
look at my
plus on
cat,
that.
who literally does this every day. I mean, beautiful. Like, such a good story. If you are not already backing, and even if you are, please go and continue backing Celeste. This is an amazing story, telling an amazing, helping so many kids understand that it's okay to be different from the
Yeah.
normal.
Tell
So
us about your Kickstarter, since Anna just opened the door
Oh,
for that
perfect.
here.
Yeah. So, self-publishing, it's actually not that expensive to self-publish. And I think it's important that folks know, you know, especially as an ally who is cisgendered, I'm not planning on making any money off of this book. So all the profits that we make once it's launched will go back into making the series possible that I explained before. And so everything that we raise for the Kickstarter will go either to paying for the illustrator, paying for the folks who helped edit and review the content, and then paying for fees for printing and mailing and that kind of thing. But it still costs money, more than I had to give to illustrate it. And so the original goal was $2,000 to pay for what I just described, and we made that like in the first week, and that was just amazing. Yeah,
That's
and now
fantastic.
I'm hopeful if we can raise a couple more $100, then we'll have enough for me to pay for the illustrator to illustrate a sequel.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and I was looking at your stretch goals here, and it looks like we made it to the first
Yes,
one of 2,500 to
yes,
distribute books to 25 books to schools and
yes.
libraries, which is super freaking awesome.
So
Super,
awesome.
super
And
awesome.
there is an option too, for those listening, that you can order a copy for yourself and order a copy for a school, and that's such a great. I just feel like that's part of the whole deal here. Is we need to be getting the message out to as many places as we can. So I think that was very
Yeah,
wise.
that was a newer goal. It's like, why didn't I offer this earlier? Because it's great. I think people, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to um, give to libraries and schools, and then it's there as a resource for those places.
Celeste, as of recording this, how many more days do people have to go and back your project?
14, 7.
14.
It'll be sorry. It'll be 7 when
Okay,
we
It'll be
release
7 when
the
we
Sunday.
episode.
release
So.
it, yeah.
I was like,
So if you are listening to this podcast on the day that it comes out, you will have 7 days to go to Celeste's Kickstarter and back this book. We will link it everywhere. So please go and back this book, especially if you have a young kiddo who you want to help educate about non-binary topics, trans topics, what have you, or if you just want to send a book to a library or school to help those kiddos out, or have one for yourself. I'm probably going to order one for myself because it's super freaking awesome. So
It
and
is
then when
super
you
freaking
order a
awesome.
book, some of that money, so it's enough to give you a book, and then more of it to go towards publishing the second book. So it's kind of a win-win sort of situation. You can pre-order your books, you can donate a book, and then you're helping us make a sequel. And so I wrote this book out of like sort of like necessity and just the desire to make it happen, right? But I don't want to be the author for the sequels, right? I would love to
Oh
have
yeah.
someone who is non-binary, someone who is trans, you know what I mean, write these stories instead of me. And so to the audience, people who are interested in connecting and collaborating with this is an open project. So
That's
telling
fantastic.
authors.
I, as a non-binary and binary trans person, am more than happy to help in any way I can. I can't say my writing is going to be the best, but I will definitely help edit or
Yes,
something like
and
that.
also for
So
folks who, you know, they're nervous about writing a story, I think that's where it can be a collaboration, right? So Anna,
Yeah.
you work with
yeah.
young kids, so you actually are probably perfect at it. But for folks who haven't, figuring out how to make something accessible to 3-year-olds can be, it can be a little bit of a challenge, and that's something that I'm happy to work with people um, to make that happen. It's all about finding that story, though, finding that spark.
Yeah,
exactly.
and that's the magic that you bring. Well, Celeste, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today. You're phenomenal. Keep doing great work, and we're really excited for
Oh
the
my
release
God.
of your
You guys,
book.
thank you so much. This was such a joy. I so appreciate your support and um, giving some air to this Kickstarter and all of the work that you guys do and just literally the joy you bring to the world. It is awesome. I so appreciate it.
Thanks, Celeste.
Thanks, Celeste.
Okay.